Don't knock over. No, don't. Stop. Stop. Over here. Come around. All right, so some big news. Me and my husband moved. My husband got this job opportunity that we really couldn't say no to, and it all moved really quickly, and we're in a completely different place now. So we've been really busy packing everything up, moving. We're pretty settled in the house. The garage is still a mess. Our yard, I think, is the biggest project I want to tackle first because it is pretty bare. It's basically just a sandbox. This is a good example of partly why I want to cover up the sand. Augie's been digging in it like crazy and he's tracking the sand into the house. So I want to figure out a solution that allows us to keep the house and the yard a little more clean. Right now, it's just kind of a disaster zone. To be honest, I really have zero yard and landscaping experience besides pulling weeds, which still means zero experience. So this will be an interesting project and definitely a learning experience. The space was looking pretty apocalypse movie chic at the start. During the move, I had just thrown all the outdoor furniture back here carelessly, and there was a ton of dust and sand all over the cement section from our pup's digging exploits. I cleaned it up as best I could to start with a blank slate, and then got to shoveling. The sand was about equal height with the cement area, and I knew I'd have to dig down at least 3 or 4 inches. It was pretty tedious work, and I definitely got my workout for the day. Definitely have a lot more respect than I already did for people who do this as a job full time. I've been shoveling for about 2.5, maybe 3 hours, and it feels like I've barely gotten any progress. But I know it just feels that way because it's taking a while. I'm hoping I can get it to a good place in the next 2 hours, so we'll see. Look at this little guy I found. Now I can say I discovered a dinosaur in my backyard. Once I had dug down far enough, I enlisted Kyle to help me pick up some pavers from our hardware store. We don't have a truck, so we had to rent one to pick them up, and even then we were getting pretty close to the max weight it could handle. Unfortunately, I didn't fully think through how heavy these pavers would be. I wanted to go with 24-inch by 24-inch pavers because I thought they would be more stable and shift less in the long term, but I was not prepared for how extremely heavy they were. We got a little assembly line going and we were able to get them all in the garage along with the pea gravel. Before laying down the pavers, I raked out the loose sand and alternated between wetting the sand and tamping it down with my shovel. I did this multiple times all the way through. I also used a heavy cooler towards the end to help tamp and get it as level as I could. This worked, but it's definitely not the pro way to do it. I did this a few times until I felt like the sand was pretty packed down. Next, I laid down some landscaping weed barrier fabric. It's pretty unlikely that anything would grow up through the sand, but I figured it couldn't hurt, and it would be also a little barrier to keep the sand from coming up through the top layer of pea gravel over time. When it was finally time to lay down the pavers, I hauled them over one by one. This was definitely the most physically taxing part of the entire project. I used spare 2x4s to make sure I had equal spacing between each individual paver and to help create the grid pattern. According to Home Depot's website, these pavers weigh about 90 pounds, so I'm feeling very thankful right now for all the deadlifts that I do when I lift. But even so, 90 pounds of weight when it's a cement square and a weird shape to carry is pretty challenging. Alright, I think I'm going to try to get at least half of them over here before it gets dark so that I have less of the heavy lifting to do tomorrow. Because tomorrow I'm hoping to finish up all the paver placement and then it'll be time to go and put the pea gravel in between. And then I can move on to some other projects that I want to do to make this space really nice. It'll all be worth it. That's what I tell myself. This is gonna be my stopping point. It's time for bed because I'm about to fall asleep standing up right now. I am reinvigorated this morning. I got my coffee and I am ready to tackle the rest of the stones. Yesterday I finished my full-time job around 5 and did all that work, so today I have the full day. I have my family coming tomorrow, so I really want it to be all done when they come through tomorrow. After I was done laying out all the pavers, I went through and adjusted any that were looking slightly off the grid and replaced the one paver that had broke in the beginning. You also might notice that the paver to the right and center slightly sticks out. Unfortunately, the cement around the fence pole prevented it from perfectly aligning with the rest, so I would just have to live with that. I also went around and tested to make sure all of the individual pieces were looking level and feeling stable, using my very professional seesaw method. There were a couple that were slightly wobbly where sand had shifted underneath that I had to correct. I'd also gotten some lawn edging to use around the bottom of the fence and around the jade plant that was already in the yard, but decided against using it all the way around the edge of the yard because I just didn't like how it was looking. I'll likely need to figure out another solution in the long term to keep the sand from outside the yard slowly infiltrating the gravel. I also went ahead and used landscaping staples to secure the landscaping fabric and used some of the lawn edging to section off the jade bush. And here's a little Augie double checking my work. After all the shoveling and heavy lifting, it was actually a really nice change of pace to start sweeping in all of the gravel, and it went really quickly. Also, it was oddly satisfying. I'm pleasantly surprised with how it turned out. When the area was just deep sand, it wasn't really an area that we could just casually hang out, bring out patio furniture, especially with the dog digging a bunch of holes and kicking up dust constantly. So I'm really happy we now have a super functional space that we can entertain guests, but also just lounge around ourselves. Obviously, this wasn't a pro paver build. I'm guilty at times of getting a project idea in my head and then just jumping into it without fully thinking it through, and I was a bit guilty of that here. I did some research in the beginning, but it was later on in the process, as I was reading more and more into it, I realized I probably should have put down a coarse gravel or paver base and then brought the sand back on top to help level it. Time will tell if I come to regret this. Right now everything seems pretty stable and we don't get extreme weather here. It's pretty temperate. The most we deal with is a little bit of light rain or fog. But if in a year the paver starts sinking or shifting a bunch, then worst case scenario, I can pull them back up and redo it and add that paver base. And that'll be my punishment for not doing more research up front. Thanks for following along, and I'll see you in the next one.